Good evening, friends. Apparently, fantasy football still exists even when me and Dan aren't competing for anything. So, welcome to week 12, a somber occasion of week 12. Dan, this should have been the most exciting week of the year. We should both be fighting for playoff spots and talking about how we are going to ruin each other's season this week. And instead, we're hoping this is a preview of the first pick of the year game. What the fuck, man?
So, here's the thing. I do have a little hope in this. I will enjoy the fact that if you lose to me this week, it will guarantee you a non-winning record.
Oh, that's good.
So I will take some happiness in that.
I have no happiness right now.
It's not the same. But
I also don't know if what happened on Thursday night just took the wind out of my sails so much. I did not expect to wake up Friday and be completely out of our matchup already. This feels like a Thursday beatdown. I know you don't think that I am, but you're wrong, and I am. So
Christian McCaffrey is absolutely due to go off. Absolutely.
That's true. And now they have no quarterback, so it's either one of two things. He's going to have his worst game ever, or he's going to have his best game ever. So, all right, Dan, let's look back at week 11. I want to start with Stevie just coming in and immediately breaking the season high that Kenny's team put out there. I do also want to point out, I don't have the document up right in front of me right now. For those that are looking at the league records on Sleeper, those are not the official league records. You need to go to the league document for those, because while Taylor does have the high score ever on Sleeper, that is not the high score ever. The high score ever is not showing up for me right now. Oh, I don't have in a game. That's right. I don't even keep track of. Oh, wait, no, I do. 225 points from JR back in 2018. That was before we did fractional points. So we have had a 225 point game from JR back then. So just keep that in mind, that some of the records you see on there are not the all-time records. But anyway, Metzger, when I look at Steve Weiss's team, I think the thing that just pisses me off the most is that I bought Caleb Williams and then he replaces him with Bo fucking Nix from waivers, I imagine. I don't remember how he got Nix. 307 yards and 4 touchdowns last week. His entire team goes off. Both of his running backs over 28 points. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Cooper Kupp, all of these guys over 25 points. Hunter Henry, 9 points. 9 points out of Devontae Adams in the flex, 5 out of his IDP, 6 out of his kicker, 10 out of his defense. Just a very well-rounded team, and why, sneak preview for the end of the show, he is still my league champion.
He's been on a couple different teams. Bo Nix. Yeah.
I'd love to know, and maybe I'll do the research on this just to pour salt in my own wound. I'd love to know where he was the week I bought Caleb Williams, because if he was out there.
What week do you think that was?
I'm
going to tell you right now, he was a free agent. He was out there. He was a free agent. He was cut by Horvath on September 8th and then got picked up on October 30th. So for 7 weeks, he was just sitting there.
And even worse, I needed a quarterback that week and rode with Geno Smith. I could have at least grabbed Bo and been straight, and then maybe not in the bad spot that I'm in right now. Whatever. Fantasy football sucks. But anyway, Steve Weiss, very well-rounded team. And he's kind of Dan, I've kind of taken your mantle and I can't get the quarterback position right this year. Steve Weiss is like the opposite of that. He doesn't seem to be able to get the quarterback position wrong this year.
I think he's going to get it wrong this week.
Ooh. And then hilariously, Greg, one of our, I think the third lowest score this week, plays him. Greg now 9-2, but can you feel really great about 9-2 when you just got doubled up by a playoff team?
No, I would absolutely feel great at 9-2. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's an asinine way of asking that question. When I wrote down, Dan, I've been very formulaic for our show. I take notes on the high score. I take notes on the low score. And I said, Taylor and Mott's had the low scores. But I think me and Greg probably feel worse about our scores than Taylor and Mott's do. I know I certainly do. I only scored 81 points. Complete blowout. Ends my playoff run. Ends my season. Ends the streak that I fought so hard for. And man, Dan, did it hit me like a ton of bricks how much I paid for Caleb fucking Williams now that I'm out of the playoff race. So full of remorse could easily be my team name right now.
Full disclosure here. I was going to pick up Caleb Williams to go against you for that very reason, thinking he was due. But then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with Richardson instead. But then I got outbid. And before I could get to Williams, you already got him. So
I honestly just grabbed him for the Pyrrhic victory. I've already lost so much. I just don't want. I didn't even consider that you would be playing him against me. I just didn't. Yeah, I didn't want anything worse to happen. Dan, do you have any notes for week 11 before we dive into week 12?
Just pain.
Yeah, I don't have anything to argue with there, Dan. Some interesting matchups this week. I have picked my game of the week, but there are two that probably could be game of the week. But I'm going to give it to Kenny and Darren as they are the two current playoff teams fighting one another. So that is going to be our game of the week. Let me get the games up on the screen here. Which means, Dan, I was like, do I just save us for last? And then I'm like, no, let's just get it out of the way because obviously Sleeper puts us first. So the first matchup we're going to talk about, Dan, is me versus you, 4-7 versus 5-6. And you bring up an interesting fact that, well, I can't only go 6-7, right? No, we do go 14, so I can't go 7-7. Yep. My brain's stuck in the old ways. So Russell Wilson, Dan, gives you a bit of a disappointing matchup, but that was the end of your disappointment on Thursday night. 2 touchdowns, 17 points out of Nick Chubb, 27 points on 3 sacks out of Myles Garrett, and another 14 points out of that out of the opposite defense from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And meanwhile, Keeper George gets me a whopping 6.4, and Cedric fucking Tillman, who I've had so much faith in, catches 2 balls for 28 yards, but then fumbles and gets me 0.4. Dan, Sleeper has you winning this game by 26 points. I don't have much to add to this one. I also have you winning. The bye week even hurts you more than it hurts me, and I still don't think I'm in any position to come back in this matchup.
I mean, I can't blow this kind of lead, so I'm going to pick myself. I have to win. But I don't think it's over. I think it ends up being closer. I think it's a 15-point game. Did you see the last play of the Thursday night game?
No, I've not seen anything from the second half of that game. I went to bed at halftime.
So they throw it. Pittsburgh throws a Hail Mary, try and win it. Pickens makes no attempt to play this ball. He is literally just taking the corner from the Browns out of the back of the end zone, like shoving him, and throws him into the wall, and they get into it. Like he had never even looked for that ball. He did not care. It was strictly about taking this corner and just driving him through the back of the end zone. It was hilarious. It was the most George Pickens thing ever.
He is such a weird guy. And I don't know, Dan, obviously my season ends in a unceremonious fashion. I'm not happy with my draft positions right now. I have some people who I might be able to trade in the offseason, but I just don't think we're going to have as big an offseason trade market as we've seen in the past. It's all ugly. Obviously, Dan, with a win this week, you're still in contention for the playoff spot, but it's going to take some work probably for some others to get you in at 8-6. Though I will say, Dan, my model does now have 8 wins getting into the playoffs. So I think you're alive if you can win out.
Yeah, I win out. I play Terry next week, and we're both right there in contention. So that'll be a tough game for each of us. Then I finish up with Stevie.
Hey, I mean, those are at least if you win both of those games, you know you belong in the playoffs. So it shakes out well. We'll be skipping Darren and Kenny for the time being and moving on to Eric versus Motts, 4-7 versus 3-8. Not a lot going on here, but we are playing for points in the lottery. If I remember correctly, neither had anybody on Thursday. So no Thursday letdowns here, Dan. Right now, Sleeper has it as 93 to Motts, 89 to Eric so far. From the most exciting matchup. When I broke this down, I have this as a close matchup at quarterback. These guys, Patrick Mahomes hasn't played well, but he's starting to get better. He gets Carolina, which should be an easy matchup, but I also wonder if that's like a take your foot off the gas kind of easy matchup. CJ Stroud gets Nico Collins back, but Tennessee's been like a tougher matchup on defense. I called that kind of equal. Eric wins running backs, but Motts takes it at wide receiver and flex for me, and I think that's going to be enough to get Rob Motts off the schneid and get him a win this week, Dan. I'm picking Rob Motts.
I'm going against him. I'm taking Eric and his running backs along with.
I forgot to mention, Dan, you took the lead last week. I went 4-3 for what's like the 5th straight week. non-hilariously, I am 44-33 for the season. You went 5-2 to jump out to the 1-game lead, 45-32. Darren had his worst week of the season, 3-4. He is 42-35 and falls 3 games behind you. So the games where we go against, Dan, you seem to be doing better right now.
Well, let's hope that continues. I'm going to take Eric. I like the running backs and quarterback matchups versus. I just don't trust Stroud right now. He's just look terrible.
Yeah. Eric gets his ass saved by Kareem Hunt having that whole backfield to himself because Eric's the one who is in a weird spot right now. I mean, he does have Xavier Worthy, but again, it's throwing Javonte Williams at the running back and then throwing Xavier Worthy in. But Kareem Hunt having that backfield to himself against Carolina kind of protects him even against a Patrick Mahomes letdown game, Dan.
Can we talk about Taysom Hill for a little bit?
So what's funny is in other leagues, Taysom Hill changed the world, but the way we do our scoring, he only scored 35 points last week. Incredible.
Only. Did you hear that? Only.
We've seen so many better weeks than that in our league already.
That's a lot of points from your backup tight end.
Now I'll give you that for what he is. Okay, so I've actually been covering this. I'm going in to look at some of the flex weeks, by the way, but it's certainly the best week by a tight end this season. What I will say is my rub with Taysom Hill has been all season long, all career long. He's not a tight end, and that's my issue. If we called him a running back, I would be much more okay with Taysom. I don't even need to go any further. I've already found 3 weeks better than the week he just put up. However,
I'm not saying the dude was. My thing is his high before this week was 11 points.
Okay, and that's fair. He had that 2 touchdown week. I think it was 18 or 19 points, but he definitely doubled it up this week. I had to talk about this on a lot of shows this week. Career high in rushing yards, career high in receptions and receiving yards. So he earned it this week. It's not like it was just vulturing touchdowns that got him the win. But again, cheat code in fantasy football right now, being at the tight end position. As you pointed out, his best week to this point was
week 4.
Yeah, week 4, 13 fantasy points. So he scored 2 touchdowns and didn't do shit else, which is the Taysom Hillist of stat lines. But this week, he did a lot, and it's incredible. You have to plug him and play him for the rest of the season, right? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter to Eric what he does in this situation because he's unlikely to make the playoffs. He's got the same record as me. But from this point forward, he's your tight end, ride or die, right?
It just hurts. So much pain.
Oh, did he get you last week? Is that how you lost?
That's how.
I didn't realize you were that bitter about Taysom.
Oh, I'm very bitter.
Okay.
Very bitter. I lost that last touchdown he had at the end of the game, sealed the victory for him.
Yeah, and then I figured, in our league with me penalizing turnovers the way I do, if he hadn't scored those 2 extra touchdowns, it would have been a pretty, I don't want to call it mediocre week, but it would have been a more normal Taysom Hill week. But all of a sudden he has those 2 touchdowns, and instead of 22 or 20, he has 36 or whatever, So yeah, it's ugly. I get it. But I got Mach, you got Eric, because Eric doesn't have Taysom Hill this week. Moving on to at the beginning of the year, what sounded like it could be a really fun matchup. You got Taylor at 2-9 taking on Rob P. I don't think we need a ton of analysis here, but I will point out that Taylor is currently up by 14 points. He got 2.6 out of Jerome Ford on Thursday night and 12 out of the Cleveland defense. Rob P doesn't have anybody going, and Rob P is projected to win this one by 30 points. Dan, anything you want to add before choosing Rob P?
No, you summed it up. Let's just go with Bobby wins. And hi, Taylor. Sorry you suck at fantasy.
Yeah. Dan, I like when we get a chance to break this down for regular football. And I wanted to get your opinion now. The San Francisco defense is looking pretty toothless. They lose Nick Bosa. They're losing a lot on offense with their quarterback play. Do you still like the San Francisco defense over the Houston defense playing at Tennessee? Will Levis seems like a master at turnovers. I think I'm starting the Houston defense in this situation over that San Francisco defense.
If this game was going to be a close game and matters, yeah, you want Houston's defense in over them. But
keep in mind, high scores could matter, and win. I mean, you're not going to lose, but everything he does could matter in this one. And I think I'd be going for the high score at the very least. So,
I mean, I get that, but what's the high score going to do for him? Because he's in the playoffs. He's not getting luck.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, that's a very good point. So
he could literally just take a 0 there and be just fine. He could probably bench half his team and still beat Taylor.
That's true. It's not a Taylor season at all. For some reason in my head, we were talking about Eric still, where I'm like, oh no, the high score matters. But no, the high score does not matter for Rob P. All he cares about is earning that bye. As we move on to someone the high score would matter for would be Horvath taking on Greg, who I want to say he limps into this matchup, but he's also 9-2, Dan. I don't believe nobody took a 0 on Thursday, so nobody has anything weird going on in the Thursday matchup. Horvath sitting at 4-7, Greg sitting at 9-2. Dan, what do you got going on in this one?
I'm taking Greg. I know he had a rough week last week. I think his team bounces back this week. He has too many good players on his team. I mean, he's 9-2 for a reason. I mean, Darnold going against the Chicago defense, not a big fan of that.
Well, see, I'm not.
What's
so
that?
Believe it or not, Dan, I actually have this as a close matchup. And I think it might actually come down to defense and IDP. But I do think that Greg has an edge at flex with Austin Eckler in that very winnable matchup against the Cowboys. And I think Greg is probably in the better position on defense and IDP. With Philly taking on the Rams, Philly's played well. Kirby Joseph's played well. I had to look up who Horvath's guy is. Byron Young, not familiar with him. And I don't love the Rams at Philly. I think that's the more explosive offense. So I think the small things are edging towards Greg. But honestly, a lot of this matchup, I could see Horvath keeping pace based on those wide receivers. So,
I mean, you trust CeeDee Lamb that much with what's his name, a quarterback? I mean,
at PPR, it's not bad. Lamb put up 13 points last week, so yeah, he's not a game changer anymore, but he can certainly score as many points as Jordan Addison.
Oh, I agree. He can score as many points as Jordan Addison, but it's just not like Horvath has been depending on those receivers having big games to keep him in the game.
Like I said, I think he stays in this one. I think it's closer than most of us think it's going to be. Sleeper has it projected as a 6-point victory to Greg, and I think Sleeper's not too far off here. We got Terry taking on Phil, 6-5 versus 5-6. And Dan, this was my runner-up for game of the week. I personally believe, looking at the schedule, the loser of this game does not make the playoffs. Phil is sitting at 13 points right now. Terry is sitting at 3.75. Phil got all of his points from Jalen Warren on Thursday night. Terry got all of his points from TJ Watt. Nobody took a 0, so that is the matchup. Right now, Sleeper has Terry projected to win this one, Dan, 105-96. And I say that to say, when I put everything into my model, Phil won, and that was enough for Phil to steal Terry's playoff spot. Spoiler alert for after this segment. I think this game is going to lose the playoffs for Terry. I think starting Anthony Richardson this week, expecting 2 games in a row for him to be good is unlikely based on what we've seen from Anthony Richardson. I think it's still close. But then what sealed it for me was the dud from TJ Watt. And I think there's going to be better play from Phil's team on Sunday that's going to take the win for him.
I need Terry to win.
so that's who you're rooting for?
Terry's going to get the win. Phil's team is doo-doo. Phil, you stole me wings.
Dan, I did want to look at this one for Phil. Quentin Johnston has come on as of late, and he gets a Baltimore defense that has given up a lot of big games to wide receivers. Phil is benching him in favor of starting 2 tight ends, K. Dotton against the Giants, or even Nick Westbrook-Akine taking on Houston, who has scored a ton of touchdowns lately. Westbrook-Akine has. I personally would start Johnston over both of those guys, but at the very least, I think you have to get him into your wide receiver spot over Westbrook-Akine. Do you agree with that?
I mean, it's a common sense move, but I also have seen Phil start these 2 tight ends before this season, and it's worked out great for him when he's done it. Phil's just having one of those seasons where things just fall his way.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong there at all. And Stevie, you joined at the perfect time. Your matchup is next. So we just finished up Phil versus Terry. It's another disagreement there. Dan is picking with his heart, taking Terry, while I'm picking with my brain, taking Phil. Stevie wants to know what we think about his matchup, Dan. He's got JR this week, only 8 points scored in this matchup so far. That is 8 points from the kicker, Chris Boswell, the number 1 kicker in fantasy football right now. JR needs this to stay in the race, just like many other people. He is 5-6. Stevie at 7-4 and just surging as of late. Sleeper has this one as Stevie by 14 points. Dan, I'll let you get us started.
I think Stevie walks away with this one pretty quickly, pretty easily. Sunday gets a good night rest. And Steve's team's just putting up a lot of points right now. They're playing well. None of his guys are going against really tough defenses. I mean,
yeah, that's what I noticed too.
Brown could have a monster game. Barkley could have a monster game. I'm not a fan of starting Michael Pittman because he's like the number 63 ranked receiver in all of football. So,
yeah, would you start Lockett over him? That was one of my questions.
Yeah, I would start Lockett over him. I would pretty much start anybody over him. I also would switch his quarterbacks as well. I don't like.
That was the second question and the most important one.
I said it earlier. I thought he was making the wrong quarterback choice. Baker Mayfield, Tampa Bay playing up in a cold, windy game in New York, or Bo Nix playing in a comfortable game in Las Vegas against a terrible Raiders team.
Yeah, I think when I looked,
decisions like this are why Steve's not going to win the championship. He might have a good team, but his game day decision making is not on point.
I mean, he hasn't made his decision yet. We could talk him into the right decision. I had this one at pretty even at quarterback. I do think Bo Nix would be a nice replacement, and even pretty even at running back. Because Jared Goff, I'm worried that this is going to end up being a running back game. But then you look at the running backs. I love Tyrone Tracy, and if you kind of flip these guys, the storyline makes more sense. Tyrone Tracy and Dobbins, I kind of feel like are in similar situations, but I think Tracy, you mentioned, in the weather that they might be dealing with in New York, I think he's an interesting play. Saquon Barkley and Kyron Williams, again, playing each other, kind of cancel each other out. But then you get to the wide receivers and it's over. Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Jaden Reed, Cooper Kupp versus Tank Dell, Trey McBride versus Dalton Schultz. And then you get to the flex. But while you even can hate Pittman, he's still starting a tight end, and I'm just not that worried about it. So all in all, I think I agree with you. While it looks even at the top, and I also would start Bo Nix over Baker Mayfield, I think Stevie runs away with this just on what we're seeing. And Stevie, you did miss me expressing my enormous regret, and what you wanted to hear at the beginning of the show was that every time I see Bo Nix on your roster,
make him go back and watch. Just tell him there's something you should go back and watch.
Every time I see Bo Nix on your roster, I get sick that I paid for Caleb Williams, and you're a prick. And I'm sure you're a good guy in real life. I hope I never talk to you ever again because you ripped me off. You deserve every bad thing to happen to you, at least in fantasy football. And that's just how I feel. Moving on to the game of the week, Dan. Two currently in the playoffs, taking on each other. Kenny sitting at 8-3, gets only 3 points on Thursday night. Darren sitting at 6-5, has not had a play yet. Kenny got 3.45 out of a very disappointing David Njoku. As I mentioned, Darren has nobody going. I like a lot of the matchups here, Dan. Kyler Murray versus Jalen Hurts, two of my favorite quarterbacks of the week. They each have a good running back and kind of a mediocre running back. Swift coming into this one injured. They each kind of have like mediocre, high PPR type starting wide receivers. At the flex, I think this is where the game changes a little bit. Another two tight end matchup this week with Dallas Goedert going in the flex versus Ladd McConkey, but Ladd McConkey does have that questionable tag. Dan, when I looked it over, I wanted to pick Kenny. I really wanted to pick Kenny, but I just think Darren has the edge at almost every single position where I just like a little bit more about what's going on with him. The matchups, the PPR aspect. You look at the Travis Kelce game against Carolina. Carolina, one of the worst against fantasy tight ends this season, after David Njoku already puts up a dud. When you look at who Kenny had on his bench that he's missing this week, Bijan Robinson, Jamar Chase, the Buffalo defense, these are the things that could have made an edge for him. And unfortunately, he doesn't have them. He catches Darren at the perfectly wrong week. Dan, I have Darren taking the dub.
Yeah, I think Darren's team overall looks better. Kenny's team, I know they got a good record. He's going to be in the playoffs. But without Jamar Chase and Robinson, his team looks dramatically different. Not nearly as tough. I hope Kenny wins. I would be phenomenal.
Yeah, you're trying to get all those close record teams knocked down a peg, right?
Wells, and his schedule the rest of the way is pretty comfy cozy. So I don't think he's going to be taking very many. And this week won't be anything different for him. I think he takes the win.
Yeah, that's kind of where I stand as well. Just the bad bye week mojo for Kenny not working out. Dan, so that brings us to our playoff teams. And my only change is that I had to kick Terry out. So my playoff teams, I do now have Greg taking the bye ahead of Stevie. Greg has made a believer of me. So I have Rob P and Greg taking the buys. Kenny, Stevie, Darren, and Phil as the last four sneaking in. But I am not going to waver. I'm going to continue to call Stevie my champion. The guy just put up the highest score of the season last week. I love his lineup. I don't think he's beatable. I think Stevie wins this whole thing, and he has to win an extra game to do it. However, Dan, I did mention I do now have 8 wins getting in. Right now it's Phil, but obviously that's out there for somebody to steal.
I'm going to say that Terry's out. And I think Phil takes the spot as well.
Oh, wow. Does that put us in complete agreement? You have Kenny in?
Yeah, I have Kenny in. I have Darren.
Okay, because I know Darren last time he has Darren. Everybody we've had on the show recently has not had Kenny in. Like, that was our point of disagreement. So,
no, I have Kenny in. I think Phil's my biggest change, getting him in there. Not that he deserves it, but everything just goes that guy's way.
So as you guys may be looking at the screen right now, basically that means me and Dan have the current 6 teams above 500 keeping those playoff spots. Obviously, there's still a couple of games to prove us wrong. Dan, Terry, JR, and that's it. I don't think the 4-win teams have a chance. So there are 3 teams looking to steal Phil's spot, but neither one of us thinks it's going to happen. And Dan, are you changing your champ, or is it still Bobby wins?
Oh, Bobby wins all the way.
I say I had a feeling you weren't going to change your champion on this one. I did not ignore Darren. Darren has not sent me his picks yet. He'll get him in tomorrow morning, and I'll let you guys know what he picked. But just a reminder, Dan is ahead on the all-time contest, 45-32 for the season, while I'm at 44-33. Darren is at 42-35. And Dan, it was another good week for you last week, because you took down the game. Stevie, if you're still watching, let me know who you think your best quarterback and best flex option were going to be. Dan, last week you gave us Joe Burrow and CMC, and Burrow was enough to take it down for you. Rob P gave us Lamar and Andrews. I gave us Purdy and Kyron, and Darren went with Tua and Devon Achane. Darren lost to you by a singular point. Me and Rob P looked like trash. Rob took 13. I took 21. Darren scored 40, but Dan, you scored 41, giving yourself your 4th win on the season, coming close to being uncatchable, at least for the regular season. As always, Dan, do you want me to go first?
Go first, buddy.
All right. So I wanted to get weird at quarterback, and I was going to go Bo Nix. But I just think that Chargers game on Monday night is going to be the best game of the week. I'm going to go Lamar Jackson at quarterback, and I like it because he's mobile. He doesn't need wide receivers, which means I will not be going with the stack, because I would never stack him with his tight end at the very least. So I think it's going to be Lamar Jackson as the number 1 quarterback. And Dan, you kind of already touched on my guy without even meaning to. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the Indianapolis Colts this week. I think Anthony Richardson's going to implode. The Colts are going to have the Lions are going to have the ball quite a bit. And Amon-Ra in the first half, before the game gets out of hand, is likely to score 1, if not another 2 touchdowns. So my picks this week are Lamar Jackson in a shootout and Amon-Ra St. Brown in a very winnable blowout.
Well, I was going to go with the stack of Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown. But since you're taking St. Brown, I'm going to switch.
Stop letting me go first, Dan.
It's fine. I like it. You go ahead and go first.
Well, I would say it's working out really well for you. I have 2 wins. You have 4 on the season.
So I'm going to switch it up, and I'm going to go with Bo Nix.
Oh, you prick. Of course, you're going to beat me with my guy.
And I'm going to take Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, you were saying you think it's going to be a McCaffrey week. And like I said, I would feel better about McCaffrey, Dan, if Brock Purdy was playing. Do you see Brandon Allen was with the Bengals for a while there, right?
Yeah.
So is he a guy who can come in and run this offense, do you think? Because most people in fantasy are okay. I was going to say most people in fantasy are super worried right now.
I just think that they're going to feed Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
8 catches, 9 catches, a couple touchdowns.
I mean, if it helps me come back and end your season, I guess I could feel better about it. What people don't realize is me and Dan are also playing in a enormous 32-team league that we're in together. And Dan is attempting to tank for a better pick and can't seem to lose. And I am first in our division. And then Dan has already jumped out to a lead in me in that division as well. And then Dan, am I wrong? Yeah, okay, I am wrong. We played each other last week in the other dynasty we're in.
Yeah.
Where I'm tanking, but I'm doing it right.
You're much better at tanking than I am.
Well, I'm going to rewind there because I'm not. because I don't have my own first pick next year because I was not able to buy it back for whatever price I offered. So I'm tanking to tank at this point. I would rather win and fuck up that guy's first pick because I can't get it back because I'm terrible at Dynasty. But at this point, Dan, I'll give you the win in this one so you have a chance at the playoffs. I don't even know while we're just chatting live on air if I still have a shot at the bye week in the 32 team, because I took an unexpected L last week as well. So when I look at the NFC standings, 10 wins, 11 wins, that's going to make it tough. I'm sitting at 9. I would need to win out and have K-pop superstars take 2 losses to end the season. So we'll see how that goes. Dan, any parting words for our friends?
I love you guys. Have a great weekend. I'm just going to sit here in pain.
Normally, I would have terrible things to say about my opponent this week. And Dan, you've Thursday nighted the life out of me. I don't even have any bad things to say to you. And then people like hearing about our college football thing. I've snuck 2 past Dan in our last 2 games. But Dan, that Ohio State team you have right now is the filthiest thing I've ever seen, and I'm very, very nervous about how our next game's going to go. I didn't even check. Did they keep us on the schedule for each other again?
No, we don't play each other. So it won't be till the playoffs.
Okay, so the conference championship, hopefully. So
that then the playoffs. I was very disappointed. I enjoy playing you.
I don't like playing.
I've had to go to Michigan twice in a row. I thought for sure you had to come to the shoe, but
yeah. And then we're probably leaving after this year, so your our history comes to a brief pause until we build up the next teams. But that's the end of the show, guys. Dan's probably going to win, so I have nothing negative to say about him. But you know what, Dan? In the 32-team league, go fuck yourself. I'm coming for you this week, buddy. You're going to beat me with Puka Nacua in the home league.
Hope you do.
I'm going to beat you with Puka Nacua in the other league. Yeah, see, that takes the fun out of it. Never mind. Everybody have a great weekend. Good luck to everyone. Yeah, good luck to everybody, except for Dan. See you guys next time.